Okay, welcome everybody. We're gonna do tonight and next week, and that's it. Okay, at least for the next 3 years. Don't ask. All right. So step 12. Anybody got any questions on the 11th step? Want to talk about before we move on? Anything to talk about? Okay. Step 12. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we try to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. So it's three parts to the 12th step. And they use the word these, the word this, and the word these again, which are very important words. So having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. So that's the first part. So what is that? That's a promise, isn't it? That if you complete the first 11 steps, you should have awakened spiritually. So if you haven't awakened spiritually at this point in recovery, you should go back and see what you missed and do it again. Why is that door locked? So what is a spiritual awakening? A spiritual awakening is a reordering of priorities. It's a new understanding. It's a reordering of my emotions, kind of, right? And it's where you're able to think, do, and be like you haven't been able to think, do, and be before. In the back of your books, they have the appendix that talks about spirit. So anyway, the first part of the 12th step is a promise that if you complete these 11 steps by this point, you should awaken spiritually. Then the second part of the 12 steps, we try to carry this message to alcoholics. This message. And that's kind of, there's no room for, moving around here. It's kind of specific. We try to carry this message to alcoholics. So, what is this message?
Step.
What is it? The steps? Story or experience?
Steps.
That's the first part. We just said that the first part is a promise that if you complete these 11 steps, you should awaken spiritually. The second part is telling you that we try to carry this message. So the question is important then. What is this message?
The 12 steps.
In a nutshell, it is the 12 steps, but it's a little beyond that. But in a nutshell, is here's a way out. You know, I don't know if you are familiar with the history of Alcoholics Anonymous, but when they went to the Library of Congress to uh, put the book in, the name of the book was supposed to be A Way Out. Alcoholics Anonymous, this book that we have here in front of us, was originally called A Way Out. When they went to the Library of Congress, there were 12 books titled A Way Out. And being the good drunks that they were, they didn't want to make AA book number 13. So they just said, we'll just call it what we are, who we are. Okay. So let's go back then. What is this message? This message is broken into the way we've broken it down during this study. In the three parts that this study has been broken down. What is the problem? What is the solution? What is the program of action? So it's about helping a newcomer or somebody, another drunk, and helping them find out what the problem is, understanding the problem. Not what my opinion of what the problem may be, but what it says in the doctor's opinion in chapters 1, 2, and 3, and a little bit in chapter 4. So I don't have to reinvent the wheel or come up with anything. I just have to understand what I'm dealing with and help somebody else put that in their life. It's also, the message is also about helping that person to find the solution. And it's not, again, it's not my opinion on what the solution, but as it's written in the big book in chapters 2 and 4. And then it's helping that new person to actually practice the program of recovery. And again, not my opinion on what that is, but what it says in chapters 5, 6, and 7. So that's what the message is. The message is that we have found a way out. We have found a way that works. And here's what it is. So then it comes up to the third part of this step, to practice these principles in all our affairs. These principles. So again, beg the question of what is these principles? And we talked about this way earlier in the study, that these principles are as written in we saw it in the 12 and 12 in the forward, that they're the steps. If you remember that from your study, but it's the forward to the 12 and 12, the third paragraph says, AA's 12 steps are a group of principles, spiritual in their nature, which, if practiced as a way of life, can expel the obsession to drink and enable the sufferer to become happily and usefully whole. That's the forward to the 12 and the 12 and 12. Third paragraph. Yeah, and 12 and 12. So the principles are the 12 steps. Okay. So what we're saying now is that we're going to practice these steps in all our affairs. And I find it so strange that there's so many people walking around the rooms of recovery that with years and years of sobriety that worked the steps once upon a time. Maybe 10 or 20 or 30 years ago, and they've never done it again. And they've worked the steps on alcohol or drugs, and they've never worked the steps on anything else. Well, the 12 step clearly tells us to work these steps on everything, all our affairs. And I hope you've learned how to do that here, how to take whatever you're working the steps on and apply the steps to it. Now, the key to that is understanding that the only thing that addresses the problem is step one. We talked about this a lot. Step one. So step one is the problem. Step two is the solution, and steps 3 to 12 take us to the solution. So, is everybody straight on what this message is and what the principles are and what the promise is of the 12th step? Any questions on that?
Could you go back over, step one is, only talks about the problem, and step two.
Step one addresses the problem. Whatever you're working the steps on. Whatever you're working the steps on, the problem is in the first step. So, like for us to begin with, it's alcohol, right? Step one addresses alcohol. The 11 other steps don't address alcohol. They're not about the problem. They're about the solution and the program of action to that solution. And the same applies for whatever you're working the steps on. Whatever you're working the steps on is only in the first step, the problem. That's where you address that problem. So our job in here And next week, we're going to talk solely about sponsorship and how we apply all this stuff to, but our problem here is what are we supposed to do with somebody that needs help? Well, we're supposed to help them understand what the problem is. And again, not my opinion of what the problem may be, but how it's laid out in the doctor's opinion and chapters 1, 2, and 3. Okay, and I help the person understand that, put that in their life. That's your job. And then secondly is help that person understand what the solution is. Again, not my opinion of that, but how it's laid out in chapters 2 and 4 in the book. And then how to actually apply this stuff in your life. Chapters 3 to 7. Okay, any questions on that?
Where do you put the 5 chapters after that?
You mean these from the big book? Where do you mean? What do you mean? Where do you put them?
Well, I mean, everything you covered covers how the steps.
Yeah. Oh, so the remaining chapters are not necessarily about the steps, but they're about a program of action, a program of recovery, and it's in order to help us. He talks about the family. He talks about the workplace, right? And he talks about a big promise is the end of the. Yeah, vision for you is a big promise. So he talks about your partner, your wife, your girlfriend, whatever it was, family, the job, and then he ends it off with a vision for you, which is got some fantastic stuff in there that you should always go over with the people you're working with. On page 151, a vision for you. And it opens up talking about the difference between normal people and then in the second paragraph, the less people tolerated us, the more we withdrew from society, from life itself. As we became subjects of King Alcohol, shivering denizens of his mad realm, the chilling vapor that his loneliness settled down. It thickened, ever becoming blacker. Some of us sought sordid places, hoping to find understanding, companionship, and approval. I started drinking in sordid places. That wasn't like the end. That was where I started. And then he talks about the 4 horsemen: terror, bewilderment, frustration, and despair. But then he goes into, throughout this chapter, he goes into what it's going to look like for you. And it's a great place. It's a great place to work through with your sponsee.
One of my favorites. I think this is some of his things like.
Yeah, it's got great writing in it, and it's a great chapter to go over with your sponsee. This touches on a couple of the steps, vision for you, but these remaining chapters are not necessarily step work, but they're recovery work, they're program work, without a doubt. You know? But are they on, like in the rest of the before this in the book? We can go and find where they're talking about step 1, where they're talking about step 2. You can't take one of those chapters and say that's what they're talking about. So step 11 that we just finished keys us into the power of God. And then step 12 shows us the best place to put that power, and that's in service to others. So let's go back to the book then. Let's go to page 89. So he talks about practical experience shows that nothing will so much as ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics. Wow, that's an interesting statement. So if I immerse myself in helping others, that's the best protection I can have. Now, our literature does tell us that you can't give away something you haven't got. So first you have to learn it. All right? You got to learn it. You got to learn how to do it, and then you have to learn how to do it in all your affairs. It says it works when other activities fail. This is our 12th suggestion. Carry this message to other alcoholics. You can help when no one else can. You can secure their confidence when others fail. Remember, they are very ill. And he talks about some of the good things that'll happen for you and some of the things that are going to be weighing against you as you do this. I think a difference is today in my life, I'm not sober out of fear anymore. I'm sober out of joy. And that's what the 12 step is all about for me. I got joy in my life and I want to give it to the next person. I want to go back to the message, the simple message, because I want to stress the point that we shouldn't complicate it. Because it's a simple message. Here's a program that works. And then helping them understand why it works. So the message is to help the sufferer to see the problem, which is a progressive illness that progresses throughout our sobriety, to help them find the solution and help guide them through actually working the program of action. Because now we can sit down with another individual who has a similar problem to us and convey an understanding that no one else can. We could talk to a drunk or a drug addict and convey something to them that nobody else can do. That is the blessing of Alcoholics Anonymous and the blessing of these steps. So, some important notes on this here. When we carry the message, we don't carry out the message. We carry the message, we don't carry the alcoholic. The spiritual awakening comes from a result of the steps. So we don't promote recovery. We don't affect the recovery. We just carry the recovery message. Because that's where the result comes from. And the blessing is in carrying the message, I find something I need to be reminded of and something I need to remember or know or something I need to learn. And it's not by mistake that in the 12th step, when we talk about this, that he's talking about these principles, because these principles are so important to understand. How do I apply these principles to my life? To the practical application of them every day. It's so simple, but we make it so difficult. It's like when we talked about the 11th step last week, I tell you, it's so simple. It's the tool, the goal, and the directions. If you look at it like that, it's just so simple. Okay, so back to page 90. When you discover a prospect for Alcoholics Anonymous, find out all you can about him. If he does not want to stop drinking, don't waste your time trying to persuade him. You may spoil a later opportunity. This advice is given for his family also. They should be patient, realizing they are dealing with a sick person. So that's something that I'm not sure we do anymore. When somebody asks somebody to sponsor, I'm not sure that as a sponsor today, you find out all you can about the person you're working with. I don't think we do that like we did when I got sober. And it gives you this page 90. It talks about a good way to approach him and a good way to do this. And it even suggests that sometimes it's wise to wait till he goes on a binge. The family may object to this, but unless he is in dangerous physical condition, it's better to risk. Don't deal with him when he is very drunk, unless he is ugly and family needs your help. So, if you remember the drunk we had here, you don't deal with people like that. That gentleman had asked me right before that meeting that night. He told me that he really wants to quit drinking. And I told him my answer to him was, if you want to quit drinking, the first thing you have to do is quit drinking. You can't quit drinking when you're drinking. So, and then it tells him that, it tells you in page 90 here, if you don't want to see and he's not happy, wish him well and let him go. And on page 91, it suggests that if you should see him alone if possible. At first, engage in general comment. After a while, turn to talk to some phase of drinking. Tell him enough about your drinking habits, symptoms, and experiences to encourage him to speak of himself. And that's what they did with when Bill and Bob went to see Bill D in the hospital, and he was pretty violent at that time, and I think they had him strapped to the bed, and what Bill and Bob shared with him, how they were and what happened with them. And before he left, they asked him, "Would you want us to come back tomorrow?" And he said, "Yeah." So they got his interest. That's what it says here in the bottom of page 91. When he sees you know all about drinking, the drinking game, commence to describe yourself as an alcoholic. Tell him how baffled you were and how you finally learned that you were sick. Give him account of the struggles you made to stop. Show him the mental twist which leads to the first drink of a spree. We suggest you do this as we have done it in the chapter on alcoholism. If he is an alcoholic, he will understand you at once. He will match your mental inconsistencies with his own. Now, if you are satisfied that he is a real alcoholic, begin to dwell on the hopeless feature of the malady. Show him from your own experience how the queer mental condition surrounding that first drink prevents normal functioning of the willpower. Don't, at this stage, refer to this book unless he has seen it and wishes to discuss it. And be careful not to brand him as an alcoholic. Let him draw his own conclusion. If he sticks to the idea that he can still control his drinking, tell him that possibly he can, if he is not too alcoholic. But insist that if he is severely afflicted, there may be little chance that he can recover by himself. Continue to speak of alcoholism as an illness, a fatal malady. Talk about the conditions of body and mind which accompany it. Keep his attention focused mainly on your personal experience. Explain that many are doomed who never realize their predicament. Doctors are rightly loath to tell alcoholic patients the whole story unless it will serve some good purpose. But you may talk to him about the hopelessness of alcoholism because you offer a solution. You will soon have your friend admitting he has many, if not all, of the traits of the alcoholic. So, and on the next page, 93, tells us he's very curious to know how you got well. Let him ask you the question, if you will. Tell him exactly what happened to you. Okay? And that's in italic if you didn't notice. Stretch the spiritual feature freely. If the man be agnostic or atheist, make it emphatic that he does not have to agree with your conception of God. He can choose any conception he likes, provided it makes sense to him. The main thing is that he be willing to believe in a power greater than himself, that he will live by spiritual principles. When dealing with such a person, you had better use everyday language to describe spiritual principles. There is no use arousing any prejudice, again, that's his old ideas, he may have against certain theological terms and conceptions about which he may already be confused. Don't raise such issues, no matter what your own convictions are. And he may be, then it talks about he may be part of a religious thing, and he might even know more than you. That's possible. On page 94, he talks about outline the program of action, explaining how you made a self-appraisal, how you straighten out your past, your own past, and you're now endeavoring to be helpful to him. It is important for him to realize that your attempt to pass this on to him plays a vital part in your own recovery. And then if he doesn't want to see you no more, that's fine. And, there's no obligations here. And at the bottom of this paragraph, it says, maybe you have disturbed him about the question of alcoholism. This is all to the good. The more hopeless he feels, the better. He will be more likely to follow your suggestions. So a lot of people want to tell you, oh, you're too harsh and you're too rough and you're too blunt. No. Again, you have to realize who you're dealing with. Some people you need to slip this program to. Some people you need to bang it over their fucking head. So it just depends. So on the next page, it talks about we don't have no monopoly on God. We merely have an approach that works for us. Okay? And then on 96, it talks about don't waste your time chasing somebody that don't want to do what they have to do. And 97, he reminds us that helping others is the foundation stone of your recovery. And then it gives us some suggestions of what not to do, and how to do things more properly. Bottom of page 97 says, for the type of alcoholic who is able and willing to get well, little charity in the ordinary sense of the word is needed or wanted. The men who cry for money and shelter before conquering alcohol are on the wrong track. Yet we do go to great extremes to provide each other with these very things when such actions is warranted. This may seem inconsistent, but we think it is not. It is not the matter of giving that is in question, but when and how to give. That often makes the difference between failure and success. The minute we put our work on a service plane, the alcoholic commences to rely upon our assistance rather than upon God. He clamors for this or that, claiming he cannot master alcohol until his material needs are cared for. Nonsense. Some of us taking very hard knocks to learn the truth. Job or no job, wife or no wife, we simply do not stop drinking so long as we place dependence upon other people ahead of dependence on God. Burn the idea into the consciousness of every man that he can get well regardless of anyone. The only condition is that he trusts God and clean house. So that's the truth of the thing here. So it's important to understand that we can't sell the idea of recovery to somebody. We can't sell the admission of powerlessness. But what we can do is we can share the promise that the step has. We can share the steps that this thing, and we can share what we do, the principles and how we apply them in our life. And we can help somebody get from, and what you were talking about, a vision for you is a great chapter to sit down with a newcomer and read. Because towards the end of that, by the time you finish reading A Vision for You, you'd be like, would you like that in your life? And they go, oh, yeah. Stick around. It comes later in the book, not there at the beginning. Yeah. Okay. So who's got questions? Anybody got a question about any of these parts of this step? And what do we do when we're actually at this part in our recovery? Nobody has any questions on that?
I have a question.
Yes.
I just want to clarify. So on 94, when it says outline the program of action, we're just talking about like each of the steps, or can you talk a little bit more about that?
Where is it at?
On the top of 94,
Outline the program of action.
yeah. You're dealing with general
Explaining how
principles.
you made a self-appraisal, how you straighten out your past. Yeah. So that's the program of action, isn't it? You had to make an appraisal of yourself, and you had to straighten out your past, right? In the 8th and 9th step. So it's talking about and now why are you endeavoring to be helpful to him? So to outline the program of recovery is to go through those 3 parts that we talked about, helping them understand what the problem is, helping them understand what the solution is, and helping them understand the program of action to take them to that solution. And then what he's suggesting is if you use your own story in doing that, it makes it more real to the person you're talking to. You know, this is what I did. This is how I screwed up. This is what I didn't listen when they said this. When they told me to do this, I didn't listen, and I paid the price for that, you know. And then I did this. So it really helps if you outline that like he's suggesting you to do. But yeah, that's a good question.
And what about, the person that, been sober for, some period of time? And worked steps, and then worked a couple of times, several times, whatever. It's still resistant to become a sponsor, to work with the need. What about that?
Well, so I would say that person has never worked the steps. I would say it right to their face. Oh, I've been here 20 years. I've done this, did these steps 50 times. No, you never did them. You never did them. Because step 12 tells you to do this, and you don't want to do this. It's not an option. Step 12 is not an option. There's no option there. This is what you have to do. You have to sponsor people. You have to give it away. So if you don't want to do that, then you're fighting the essence of the step. And I would say they're fighting the essence of the whole program. And that somebody like that has never worked the steps.
What if they choose to do service work in all other forms instead of sponsoring?
What do you mean by service work in all of their forms?
I mean, not every.
Service positions. So service positions in their home group, service positions at a district level, service positions at an area level. Yeah, H&Is. What if they're doing those things instead of sponsoring?
Saying though, if someone's not asking you to sponsor them, are you suggesting that like the person, let's say, someone's around 20 years, not one person's asking to sponsor, should they like be going out and? Because not everybody gets sponsoring, not everybody gets asked to be a sponsor.
Right. But the other side of that is everybody has the opportunity to be asked to sponsor. But if you're here for 20 years and nobody's asked you to sponsor you, sponsor them,
Program
They don't.
doesn't look that good.
then you need to take a look. No, I'm not talking, I'm just talking in general. I'm not talking about anybody in particular. if you're here 20 years and nobody's asked you to sponsor them, then you need to look at what you're portraying out there, because you're not. Here's a question that we should all ask ourselves: am I attractive enough to somebody that's sick and suffering that they'd want what I have? I'm not talking materialistically. Doesn't matter what you have materialistically. Am I living and acting attractive enough for somebody that's sick and suffering to want what I have? Now, I have people that had 5, 6, 7 years and they never sponsored anybody. I immediately told them I want them to join an H&I committee and go to carry the message to hospitals and institutions. And every meeting that they talk about, I want you to raise your hand that you're able to sponsor somebody. And they did that, and within 2 months they had a couple sponsees. Now, and I sponsor a lot of people, and what I've done over the years is the people I sponsor, when I'm too overloaded, and somebody asks me, I say, do you trust me? And they say, yeah. Well, obviously, trust me if you ask me that. Well, listen, I'm really jammed right now, but I'm going to put you with Lisa. Miss Lisa's in a good spot, and she needs somebody to work with. And you're okay with that? And they say, yeah. And now Lisa got a sponsee. and I've done that to somebody that I wasn't even sponsoring. I wasn't even sponsoring them, but I knew they never sponsored nobody. And I yeah. And I had to talk with them that they needed to, and they said, "Yeah, I'd like to, you know." But, and then a couple of days later, I said, somebody asked me, and I said, "I'm so loaded, but trust me, I'm gonna put you with him."
And I brought you a gift.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good question. That's a good point. Well, let me ask you this, and I'm going to answer your question. I didn't answer your question, but let me ask you this. If you understand the book a little better now, when did when did the book tell us that Bill sponsored people? It wasn't the next day. It was a few months. But when did Dr. Bob start sponsoring people? It was the next day. And he actually tried to sponsor about 500 people in the hospital that they had people coming into. So the only thing that's important is, and the book tells us this, and we read this in when we were studying, we went through this, but it says here on page 58, at some of these we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. So from the very start, if I've done step one, I can now take somebody through step one. Now the book, be careful, because the book also tells us we can't give away something we haven't got. But if you get a sponsee and they're on step two and somebody asks them to sponsor them, I say go for it. Go for it. You better keep busy now, because you don't want that sucker passing you up. Go for it. Yeah, you can start smiling. You can. Somebody with 2 days sober has something to offer somebody with 1 day sober. Can they sponsor? Probably not, because they haven't got anything to give away yet. But they can offer somebody some help.
It's
And-
tangible.
And going back to what you said, this is what I have found. And I had my first 10 years sober, I was on the H&I thing 2 times a week, 3 times a week. I did all of that stuff. And what I noticed when I was doing all that stuff and the activities, doing this, being this and doing that, involved in it, what I noticed that most of the people that I met along the way were so busy doing these things, they weren't taking care of themselves. So you got to be real careful. because we could run around these rooms doing this and, sharing this and doing this and leading this and that, and not taking care of themselves. So, but to answer your question specifically, no, those things do not constitute sponsoring somebody. They do constitute working with others and helping and doing, but they don't constitute working, There's a little bit difference when you sit down with somebody and you try to carry this message to them.
Mhm.
Now, the most important thing is, I already mentioned it, is that we carry the message, we don't carry out the message. So I carry the message. What you do with that information is none of my business. If you decide to go out and get drunk tomorrow, I'm not going to lose any sleep. I'm going to be just as fine and spiritual as I was when I gave you that information. What you do with that is your business. So we carry the message, we don't carry out the message. We carry the message, we don't carry the alcohol. But what?
I'm just thinking also like, so when you get into the service structure, you got your sponsor, but you can also have a service sponsor. So there's like a,
Yeah. But if you remember the circle and the triangle, right? If you remember that, the service stuff is the concepts. So that doesn't apply in the steps.
steps.
The steps are the recovery part.
Okay.
The traditions is the God part, and so what you're referring to is in the service structure. And that's the concepts, and so that's not the same thing as what we're talking about.
You know, someone who they work the steps with a sponsor, and then they've kind of chosen that sponsoring is like not their thing, and then they do like all of the service stuff, and so
Well, so what if somebody said to you? I don't, turning my will and my life over to the care of God is just not my thing. I don't think I need. What would you say to them? I'm serious. I'm not making a joke.
yeah, no, like for me,
What would you say to somebody that said that to you? Because that's what I say to people that say to me they don't want to sponsor.
yeah, I think this is a we thing, and I think that you need to work the steps, but I think you need to do all the things. Like there's all these sides to the triangle for a reason, and it's because they each play a part.
Yeah.
In making you
Right.
better for yourself and for others, right? Like,
Yeah. But any step that I pick out and say, I don't think that's for me.
like I don't know. I guess you think you.
Everybody laughed. Everybody laughed when I said that. Yeah. Everybody laughed when I said that. But really, in essence, isn't that what they're saying when they say they don't want to sponsor?
Picking and choosing.
You don't find it to be as offensive and funny as what I just said, but it is. There's no difference. There's no difference saying, I don't know that. Turning my will and life over to God, I don't think that's for me. There's no difference between saying that and sponsorship is not for me. I don't sponsor. I know you hear it a lot, but there's no difference because both of them are the guidelines and are the directions. Don't forget that originally, when Bill wrote this in the original manuscript, the steps were directions. All right? And they thought it was too harsh, so they call them suggestions. When they came out with the first printing, they had a big argument over that. But if you read the original manuscript, you'll see that it doesn't say suggestions. It says directions. So the part of the directions was you have to go carry this message to other people. Now, if you do H&I work constantly, maybe, but even then, that's not taking one person through the steps.
It's easy to reel them in. It's
So-
harder to keep them going.
Yeah. So because one of the things that happen as I'm sponsoring somebody is I already said it. I come across things I need to remember. Listen, you guys all know my friend Barry. Most of you know Barry. we've been sober together. Every time I chat on the Western Club, I have Barry come and speak. I've sponsored him his first 20-something years. He was at the house Sunday. Good friend of mine. When he was going through the steps, and he's not the only one, he had to get to the point to make amends. And he asked me what he should do about this situation, which I won't share with you, but what he should do about this situation. And I said, what do you think you should do? So I think I need to make it right. And of course you do. I'm thinking in my mind, if that were me, I would never be able to do that. I don't think I could do that. Me, I don't think I could do that. So I was hesitant telling him he's got to do it because I didn't want to sound like a two-face. Right? But then I just said, listen, let me tell him the truth. And the truth is you need to do that. It doesn't matter if I was able to do it or not. That's not the question. I don't have to do that. And so I told him the truth, and he went and did it and made that amends. And I want to tell you, that was 30 years ago, maybe 31 years ago. I'm still fucking amazed he made those amends. Because I don't think I could do that. Yeah. And he's not the only guy that I've worked with over the years that has been like that. There's been lots of people. And I've learned some lessons from those. The lesson I learned from that particular amends that he made was, I better not ever do that shit. Because I don't want to ever be in a position where I got to go back and eat that crow, you know? So it's so important. It's kind of like making amends via phone, right? You lose the great deal of humility that you gather when you go what the book says to do, eyeball to eyeball, and look that person in the eye and say, you know, this is what I did. I apologize. You know, what can I do to make it right? There's nothing that compares to anything close to that, eyeball to eyeball. And the same thing applies here. There's nothing that when you don't sponsor somebody, there's nothing that compares to what you can get from what you sponsor somebody.
I think I learned the steps better through sponsor, teaching them than,
Well, exactly, because the best way we learn is to teach. Yeah.
idiots instead.
Yeah. So that's how we learn, by teaching.
I sponsor people, and my sponsor would always tell me, you can't chase these girls, you know, because of course I felt I had something to do, you know, with them getting sober or relapsing. Now I know that I don't, but you know, and I'd call them all the time and all that. And as I've gone through the years, like I've set boundaries and stuff like that. And I'm like, am I doing the right thing? You know, not reaching out to them. And then I have a sponsee who's been sober a couple years who hasn't sponsored yet. And it's not my job to bring it up, right? I just think she's missing out. She's really into church though. And
Why is it not your job to bring it up?
I don't know.
We just
Because
We
they're
just spent
supposed
20
to-
minutes talking about it. We just spent 20 minutes talking about that's your job.
Okay. You're missing this. I thought they were supposed to come in. Okay.
You know, and you can even explain to her that it's not an option. That's the important thing. It's not sponsoring people is not an option. It's one of the 12 steps. It's not open to debate. It's not, oh, maybe it's a good idea. I think I ought to try. No, it's one of the friggin' steps. Again, you know that turning my will and my life over to the care guy, I don't think that's for me. That's silly, right? You laugh. You think that's stupid, right? There's no difference between saying that and saying I don't want to sponsor someone. There's no difference. They're both directions from the book of the steps that we take. And if she's not doing that, you're supposed to be guiding her. If you're not guiding her that way, then what do you do? Good points, though. Who else got a question?
Let's have a comment on that.
Go ahead, Rich.
I think what ends up happening with this, like, it's really, does it offend your personality? I mean, some people just can't talk to them.
Some people can't do what?
Some people just can't keep talking. Maybe they have a great psychological problem, or got some trauma in their life. They just cannot be open and help somebody by talking to them about the program and the steps. I find that quite a bit when I'm dealing with people. Some people just don't want to go there. Don't want to go there.
Okay, interesting. Everybody hear what he said? So here's the thing. When you're sponsoring somebody, there's not really a great deal of amount of talking that has to be done. There's work that has to be done. So, and I'm not one of these people that sit down with somebody and read sentence after sentence with them. I don't do that shit. I tell them to go home and read this, and then we'll come back and sit down and go over it. All right? And so they read whatever I tell them to read, one paragraph, one chapter, whatever I suggest that they read, and I tell them how to read it. Right? We've done that in this class, and then when they come, we sit down and I listen to what that means to them, and then I can help. So I've helped people. Many people I've sponsored over the years. I've helped them sponsor their sponsees from the beginning, like get them started. Like, okay, tell them to do this, and then I'll sit down with you. And I try to stay in the background and not talk too much at all, but just to help guide him to sponsoring him. I've done that many times.
It's no different from the concepts of the education system, where some people are comfortable imparting knowledge, figuring out ways, whether it's some better method or whatever, to talk to people about things. Other people just can't do this. They just freeze up, whatever, so they just can't have that interaction. But there's ways around it. Just like you said, what you do is you open your ears, listen to how other people are doing it, figure it out.
Yeah, it's all right. It's it just takes practice. Listen, we change, right? So if that's the way you were when you got here, after you're sober for a while, you shouldn't be that way.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to read two things to you, and then we'll close out. This one here is a man is flying in a hot air balloon, and he realizes he is lost. He reduces height and spots a man down below. He lowers the balloon further and shouts, "Excuse me, can you help me? I promised a friend I'd meet him a half hour ago, but I don't know where I am." The man below says, "Yeah, you're in a hot air balloon hovering approximately 35 feet above this field. You're at latitude 42 degrees in north and longitude 80 degrees west." The guy in the balloon yells down, "You must be a sponsor." The guy in the ground says, "I am. How'd you know?" And the guy in the balloon says, "Well, everything you've told me is technically correct, but I have no idea what to make of your information, and the fact is I'm still lost." The man below says, "You must be a sponsee." "I am," said the guy in the balloon, "but how did you know?" He said, "Well, you don't know where you are or where you are going. You made a promise which you have no idea how you're going to keep it, and you expect me to solve your problem. The fact is you're in exact same position you were before we met, but now somehow it's my fault." So that's one thing. And this one you've probably seen before. Rent a sponsor? Have you not seen that? This is a great. Are you tired of being told like it is? Still looking for that easier, softer way? Had enough of that same old time-tested direction? Then you are ready for Rent a Sponsor. No reading, no writing, no deadlines. Many models to choose from. Standard features include listening to your sniffling without constant reference to the steps, co-signing your excuses and rationalizations, working with only the steps you want in the order you want, Yes, that rent a sponsor, we know how unique you are. And we do understand. Learn the secret of giving it away before you even have it. Why walk the walk when you can just talk the talk? Remember, it's better to look good than to feel good. Why save your ass at the cost of saving your face? Half measures, our specialty. Call 1-900, pour me one. Call now and receive a free copy of Staying Sober on War Stories Alone. All right.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, next week we're gonna cover all about sponsorship, and then we're done. Okay? Thank you, guys.